Welcome back to another history class. I'm your history teacher, El Negro. Today's lesson is gonna hit a little bit different. You see, typically you'll see people research like the best or the top 5 best heroes, but no. See, that's not gonna be us today. Instead, we are going to be looking at the top 5 worst fighter jet incidents. These are going to be the worst blunders that fighter pilots have ever made. These are the crashes, the screw-ups, and the catastrophic failures that ended careers, costed lives, and almost caused global conflict. So buckle up while we get this show on the road, because this is the top 5 worst fighter jet incidents. On April 21st, 2007, during an air show at the Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort in South Carolina, Lieutenant Commander Kevin Davis, along with 5 other Blue Angels, would enter their final turns into their landing patterns. This would be until Davis would pull so hard, pulling approximately 6.8 Gs, essentially making himself pass out. Unfortunately though, he would never wake up, and he would slowly fade behind the spectators going under the tree lines until he would hit the ground, sliding approximately 300 yards until his aircraft would blow up. Amazingly enough, no other person was hurt, but the pilot, I can't say the same for him. This whole ordeal only took 1 life, but would end up costing around $35 to $40 million in damages. This is not only because of the plane crashing, but when the plane exploded, the scrap hit other planes and military equipment, damaging it. On the morning of August 19th, 1981, after diverting a bunch of mock Libyan attacks on a battle group the previous day, 2 F-14 Tomcats from the Black Aces and the Fast Eagle 102s were flying air reconnaissance/air cover missions. Prior to this, a big cat and mouse game was being played by Libya and America. You see, the Libyan ruler Muammar Gaddafi would extend his airbase off the Gulf of Libya and add an exclusive 62-mile-long fishing zone. In order to combat this, newly elected President Ronald Reagan would send a naval force led by 2 aircraft carriers, the USS Forrestal and the USS Nimitz, to deploy to the disputed area. All day and all night, the Libyan forces would play mouse, poking the Navy group ever so slightly, even fake attacking aircrafts. On the other hand though, they were always scared off by F-14 Tomcats and F-4 Phantoms. Back to the main story, this would be until an S-3 Viking, flown by Navy Commander Thompson S. Sanders, would be tasked with flying a racetrack path around the Libyan airspace just to test the response time. An E-2C Hawkeye would alert Sanders of an Su-22 taking off from a base close by. After hearing about this news, 2 F-14 Tomcats would soon approach. At the same time, Sanders would drop his altitude to 500 feet. He would also start flying north because his aircraft had no radar warnings, nor did it have any countermeasures. So if he got locked and fired on, he needed an easy way to escape. Soon after coming into visuals, the F-14s would see 2 Su-22s. This would be because the radars were confused because the Sus were flying in such close proximity to each other, it just looked like one. None of the matter, they were in visuals, and then BAM! The Su-22 would open fire on the F-14 with an AA-2 Atoll infrared missile. After the F-14s would disperse and dodge the missile, they would then engage in their defensive attack. One of the F-14s would quickly maneuver right behind one of the Su-22s and fire an AIM-9L at it, effectively disabling it. The pilot would eject safely. The aircraft, not so much. The other F-14 and the other SU would kind of go into like a little fight. I should really say fight because the SU was realistically just running from the F-14. It couldn't do anything. It tried to first fly towards the sun to confuse the infrared lock, but as soon as the SU turned away from the sun, the F-14 launched an AIM-9L at it, effectively disabling a second Su-22. But again, the pilot would also eject. The American pilots were nonetheless stunned, but they were trained for something like this. They never expected the Libyans to actually shoot on them. Up until now, it was just a big game of cat and mouse. They were flying towards them, they were flying close to them. They were just basically doing what the Soviets did to the Americans during the Cold War. Oh, I want to shoot at you, but I don't really want to start a war, because, you know. The Libyan ruler would be quick to blame the American forces, but Ronald Reagan would stand 10 toes deep on this, saying, hey, you attacked us. We defended ourselves. And all, no lives were lost, but the damage to those 2 aircrafts would be 167 Libyan dinar, or $30 million US. This one just kind of boggles my mind, but on January 18th, 1982, 4 T-38A pilots at the Indian Springs Air Force Auxiliary Field would tragically all hit the ground in a diamond formation. They were practicing for a performance at the Davis Mountain Air Force Base in Arizona. They began practicing the 4-plane line abreast loop. This is when the aircraft would climb a couple thousand feet side by side in formation up, pull over in a slow inside loop, and descend at more than 400 miles per hour. They were supposed to level out at 100 feet. Unfortunately enough though, the leading pilot had trouble with his horizontal stabilization and he could not exit that dive. Being as loyal and trustworthy as they were, the 3 other pilots would follow him. They did not leave that dive. They stuck with him till the very end. They would all hit the ground at allegedly the same time, making a large explosion that reportedly looked like napalm. Major Norm Lowry, Captain Willie Mays, Davis, Captain Joseph Peterson, and Captain Mark E. Mellicone would sadly lose their lives that day, in what was, quote, the worst training crash in the 28-year history of the Air Force aerial demonstration team. Along with the 4 lives lost, the damages would total about $4 million US. On April 14th of 1944, during Operation Provide Comfort, 2 F-15s, piloted by Captain Eric Wixon and Lieutenant Colonel Randy May, would misidentify 2 UA-60 Black Hawk helicopters as 2 Iraqi Mi-24 Hind helicopters, and they would open fire on them. Prior to this, a no-fly zone was established in northern Iraq, yet the 2 Black Hawks had a mission to fulfill. At 8:22 a.m., the helicopters would depart from Zakho, Iraq. At 9:21 a.m., they would report their entry into the no-fly zone, effectively turning on their identification friend or foe, and alerting the airborne warning and control system aircraft flying above. They would gain their friendly tags by the E-3 AWACS, but they would shortly lose it after landing at 9:24 a.m., presumably to pick up some personnel. They would soon take off after getting their IFF from their AWACS, but they would later enter mountainous terrain at 10:12, losing all of their radar signatures. Less than an hour before this, at 9:35 a.m., 2 F-15C pilots, the names that were already previously mentioned, would depart from an Air Force base in Turkey with the mission of basically clearing the skies in that no-fly zone. Now, before their launch, however, it was said that 2 Black Hawks would be operating in that no-fly zone. The crazy thing is no time was given, so they knew it was supposed to happen, they just didn't know when. At 10:15 a.m., Wixon would radio the AWACF aircraft, asking them if there's anything they should know, for which they got the response of negative. So you could kind of see the F-15's surprise when they saw blips moving on their radar. And I mean, yeah, they did hear that 2 Black Hawks would be flying in that area, but their identification friend or foe was malfunctioning. So all they saw was blips on their radar. After multiple attempts to radar what these aircraft were and not getting anything, and then finally gaining visual confirmation, they had to fire upon them. I mean, that was their job, right? They would shoot both Black Hawks with AIM-120 AMRAAM air-to-air radar missiles, along with AIM-9M infrared guided missiles towards the Black Hawk. And after one helo was hit, the second helo tried to pull evasive maneuvers, but it's too late. Both aircraft would be effectively down. And after seeing the burning wreckage, they would radio to Wixon, stick a fork in them. They're done. Which would be so badass if they didn't just make the biggest blunder in history. After reporting back to the AWACS that they had just shot down 2 enemy aircraft, a scout helo was sent out to check it out. And when the scout helo had recognized the damage that had been done was to 2 Black Hawks, it was too late. He would urgently and immediately radio, "Those are Black Hawks. You just shot down Black Hawks." It's not funny, it's so tragic, but imagine being that pilot and hearing, "Hey, you just shot down your own friends." Like, oh, I'm gonna lose my job. I'm going to jail. I am cooked. Sadly, 26 lives would be lost that day. This would include military and civilian personnel from the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and even the Kurdish community. And many extensive tests would be done after this, proving that there was no ill intent. And all they could really find was that the IFF, the identification friend or foe on the helicopters, were malfunctioning, and the AWACS aircraft had failed it to the F-15s that, hey, there were friendlies really close to you. But at the end of the day, it was really a malfunction. Whose fault do you think it was? It was alleged that some people on that scout aircraft were moved around or even fired, while only one of the pilots really got close to facing court-martial, but instead he got other disciplinary actions that were not listed. Officially, no one was ever court-martialed. In total, 26 lives would be taken, and over $42 million of damages would have to be paid. Staged to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Ukrainian Air Force's 14th Corps, a Ukrainian Su-27UB, piloted by Vladimir Toponar and co-piloted by Yuri Yegorov, would crash in an air show that would leave 77 people dead. July 27th, 2002, a Sukhoi Su-27B would attempt to do a double rolling maneuver. After successfully pulling off its first maneuver, it would then enter its second. It is here where the left wing then started to tilt down and the aircraft began to stall. The pilot and the co-pilot would safely eject, but the Su-27 would crash, eventually skidding towards an Ilyushin IL-76, damaging its nose. At that point, it would explode, and debris would go everywhere, including into the spectators. This would end up injuring 543 people and killing 77, 28 of which include children. This will forever be remembered as the deadliest airshow incident ever, and would have both pilots tried and sentenced. The pilot would receive 14 years in prison, while the co-pilot would only receive 8. It's reported that 3 other military officials would also be in prison due to failing to follow direct orders, negligence, and violating flight rules. With the death toll being 77, the damages done would cost 7.2 hryvnia, or 1.42 million US dollars. And those, ladies and gentlemen, were the greatest blunders in fighter jet history. These were pilots who faced malfunctions, stupidity, and poor communication. Go ahead and let me know down below which one surprised you the most. And if you like this video, go ahead and show some love. Hit that like, hit that sub, especially comment. It means big time and it helps out a lot. Let me know of any videos that you might want to see in the future. But without further ado, my name is Outtro. You guys all have a good day and a good night. Y'all stay safe. Peace.